We do have quorum. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. We welcome you to our Utah Lake Commission Governing Board meeting. We are going, do we have any items that we need to change on the agenda? I'm not aware of any. Eric, we're not.
I think we have one. No, we're all good.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Just so you are aware, we've got the canvases from the photo contest back in the back. We invite you to look at those, check those out. We've got some very beautiful pictures back there. And then also for each of the cities, yours is back there to take home with you. So make sure you grab yours as you're on your way out.
If anyone did not get to select one and would still like one, Sam's still taking orders.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Okay, action items. We've got our governing board minutes from December 12th. Do we have any changes to those? Okay. I'll take a motion.
I'll motion that we approve the minutes of December 12th.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our monthly financial reports.
Nothing to report on the financial reports. We're on target for all budget items. There's nothing that's of concern at this point. Any of the adjustments that we'll be making based on this year's tracking will be reflected on our next year's tentative budget that we'll talk about here shortly. So.
Okay, very good. Do we have any questions or concerns about the financial reports? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the financial report.
Okay, from Councilmember Hewitt. And second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Tentative budget for fiscal year 2020. Eric.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here today. We've got great attendance and it's very helpful when we go over our budget documents so that everyone's aware of any changes. So coming in this upcoming year, you won't see a ton of changes as we go through the first page, which is our general fund budget. I'll just kind of go down the right-hand column. The far right-hand column, you'll see the percent changes. So we'll kind of identify where we've had some changes. So publications, we're bumping that up just a touch. Public notices, we dropped that down a little. We only do one public notice or maybe two public notices per year when we do our actual budget hearing. And so that has been a little higher than it needed to be. Office supplies, dropping that just a touch just because it usually is just a little bit under that amount of 4,000. Postage, we don't do nearly as much with the postage that we used to. Historically, there was a lot of information that was mailed out to governing board members. Emails kind of taken over and is much more convenient for folks. So if there's not a disagreement on that, it seems to be an easier way to get documents out in a speedy way. So we still, on occasion, will mail out letters to landowners when we're doing treatments around the lake. If we can't find them via phone or email, we'll use a hard copy letter to send out to try to get responses back on approvals. So we'll still keep a small amount in the budget for that. Conferences and workshops, that we bumped that up a little bit. There's lots of good conferences and we're trying to kind of expand our network as a commission, and we find that conferences are a great way to do that. And so we've got our outreach coordinator going to a number of different conferences and then myself going out to those as well. So just to kind of stay within our budget. That's been adjusted a little. Insurance, we're just bumping that up about 8% just to keep up with what typically is adjusting, and this is our liability insurance that covers essentially our activities down at the state park. So these are our spring and fall field trips and the Utah Lake Festival that requires us to have an umbrella insurance package that's substantial simply because it takes place at a state park. So. Otherwise, outreach and promotion, we bump that up because we typically see a lot more of our sponsorship or our marketing through promotion rather than actual event sponsorships, and so we just made an adjustment in that, bumped that up a little and dropped the event sponsorship account down just a little bit. And that's it for the general fund. We switch over to membership contributions, the next page. A minor adjustment, 1.5% for municipal contributions, and that helps bring it up into the alignment with the interlocal agreement, which kind of divvies out the percentage of municipal contribution versus county versus state. And so that there was that adjustment made. You'll notice also that under the state contribution in kind of the bottom portion of this, Department of Natural Resources has merged their forestry, fire, and state lands, the department contribution, and state parks, who were added last year, into one contribution that represents $68,000. Otherwise, those contributions for Department of Environmental Quality, Central Utah Water, Conservancy District, and Utah County remain the same as the contribution from last year.
Okay.
And then lastly, if you go to the last page, this is our capital projects fund. This is one that we have a budget request for this year. So in an effort to get some great projects done down on our access points, we are requesting $30,000 this year to be used out of our capital projects fund to act as sort of a seed fund for projects like beach enhancements, marina enhancements. Utah County Commission have informed us that there are dollars available through TRT for communities that want to do improvement projects down along the lake. And so with the combination of a portion of this, which we will divide up on a grant type basis for communities that want to do improvement projects on the lake, the county has asked us to come and present any projects that your communities would like to see done so that they could also contribute either a match or even greater than a match to whatever that amount is that we're contributing and that the community could bring to the table. So most communities that are around the lake right now have master plans in place. I know that the state park has one, American Fork Boat Harbor has one, Saratoga Springs City Marina has one. We don't have one on Linden, but at least those three major access points have master plans in place, and most of those are also in phased potential. So bring some ideas to the table over the next few months, and we can help that happen. This simply helps us kind of get people excited about it. It doesn't go a long ways, but I think that we'll be able to leverage these dollars with county and community dollars to really make a difference on some improvements that are needed around the lake. Otherwise, those are the changes for our budget, and that's the tentative budget as it stands today. Do we have any questions on that?
I have a question.
Please.
So on the P&R section, I'm showing an increase, is that correct? From the proposed, from the current?
There's a small increase, and that was the addition, and just a very small, it's a couple thousand
right.
for the addition of state parks.
Okay, I'm just confirming.
So the Director Styler had suggested just combining, for simplicity's sake, the contribution from forestry, fire, and state lands, and then adding a small amount for state parks so that it would just be a simpler transaction for the department, and would allow the inclusion of state parks on the governing board last year, and that was approved. And so it just adds a small increase to that overall budget amount.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mark?
I had a question. I really like the membership contribution statement that gives us an idea of all the different members. Is it possible to have added into that what the amounts would be for the cities that are not included? In other words, I see on there, Cedar Hills and Eagle Mountain, but it'd be interesting to see what their amount would be if they were to join.
Yeah.
Because I suspect some of these are pretty small amounts. It's more of a symbolic to be part of the team scenario. But
Yeah. The minimum amount is 500. But what we could do is just turn. Yes, it's programmed into this spreadsheet so that I just hit that little X on the side. I could bring a copy of that to our next meeting and just turn all of those on, and it would just reduce everyone's Yeah, we could do that for sure.
Okay. Are you saying it wouldn't change the total amount?
No, it's kind of like property tax in that regard. We decide what our annual budget is, and then it repopulates all of those amounts based on how many of the cities are checked.
Gotcha.
So I can do one where same budget amount, and then uncheck all of those or check all of those, and it'll reduce everyone else's contribution and show what theirs would be if they were all there.
That'd make it a little easier also than to go to some of these other cities and say, hey, this is what your contribution might be, and yet these are all the benefits you're getting, especially on some of them where they are going to be such small amounts.
Yep.
Okay.
And just for the record, Cedar Hills has joined.
Yeah, Cedar Hills is on there. It's Cedar Fort that hasn't.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah,
My
that's
bad.
okay. I'm grateful to have. Yes. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. At this time, we'll accept a motion on the proposed, the tentative budget for fiscal year 2020.
I move we approve the tentative budget for FY 2020. As noted.
Thank you. Go first and second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approved unanimously. Thank you. Okay, at this time we've got our open meeting and open and public meeting training with Rob Moore. Please.
Where would you like me to stand?
Do you want to stand down like Eric, and then you've got your microphone that way? That'd be great.
Thank you. My name is Rob Moore. I'm with the Utah County Attorney's Office. I've been there about 19 years, and I'm grateful to be here this morning, bright and early. I'll keep this short. I know most of the audience has had training similar to this in their roles. I will also mention to you that I have left a certificate up here with Eric for each one of you that the Utah County Attorney's Office does. So next time you're told you need to have training, you can show it and say, I've done it. So
Sweet. Because this is like my fourth or fifth one.
I'm sure that is. But let me just mention one thing before we start in Utah County. You may know this, at least one thing on your agenda today, we may discuss this. Utah County has acquired a couple parcels along Utah Lake. One is Lincoln Point, which you may know about that one right on the south side of the lake. That's 17 acres. That was about in the last year. A more recent parcel Utah County has acquired is what we call, it's on the west side of the lake, and we call it the Knowles property, purchased from the LDS Church. And that property consists of 37 acres, and we're currently working with DWR with a contract to put a boat marina on there. It's a fisherman's boat marina, if you will. So a small
Boat marina.
boat launch, boat ramp. It's a gravel boat ramp.
Yes.
More accurately. So, and a parking lot. So we're working on that right now. We just acquired that property and closed about a month and a half ago. So just for your information on that. Okay, just again, thanks for your service today. I'm not going to go through all that I've provided to you, but I want to just mention the new bills that were passed, but please understand they have not been signed by the governor. Let me start with, well, I'll mention one that did not pass. That was HB 74. That was related to a closed meeting to have discussion regarding legal advice from your legal counsel. That one went through the House, passed the House. got through the Senate for the most part, and then I think it died at the last minute. I think it must have run out of time. It went through the second reading calendar, but it ran out of time. So that one might probably be back, my guess. But 3 bills I'll mention to you real briefly. SB Senate Bill 27, sponsored by your own Senator Henderson, related to government nonprofit corporations and allow for closed meetings for trade secrets. SB 45, Senate Bill 45, related to legal notices, and that one mostly, in my view, applies to smaller counties outside Utah County. The one that applicable to Utah County is SB 165. That was Senator Enereg's bill. That one was also, the House sponsor was Representative McHale, who's a member of this board, I understand. And Commissioner Tanner Ainge was the one that kind of pushed that one. That one would exempt from the quorum requirements 2 elected officials, would allow them to speak to each other as long as no formal or informal action is taken. It used to have, it had a provision in there that said you could have 2 elected officials discuss items and would not be, as long as they were discussing about their something related to their advisory power. So that advisory power was eliminated from that. So again, that allows 2 elected officials to speak to each other regarding a matter as long as they don't take a formal or informal vote. Now that doesn't apply to most of you because 2 elected officials in a city council persons would not be a quorum anyway, because you have more than that. But it does apply to Utah County Commission because there are 3-member commission currently. Okay, let me just, if you look at the next page here, on the first page, you'll see the 2018 amendments. I'm not going to address those. Those are from last year. Some of you had training similar to that. Let me go to page 3 and the summary, and let me start with number 2. And this is what I'll always say to anyone who ever talks about the Open Public Meetings Act, is that you have to view it through the intent. The court views it through the intent of the act. And so when you're thinking about the Open Public Meetings Act, you have to always keep this intent in mind. And that is that the actions are to be taken openly for the most part, including deliberations. And so when the court looks at these 2, they also look at those things and make sure that it's everything that's, when the questions applied related to the Open Public Meetings Act, they're always looking through this intent lens, if you will. So that's something to understand. So again, actions taken openly and deliberations openly. A meeting is a public body, convening a public body with a quorum present. To mention that quorum was just modified slightly by SB 165. And a quorum is a simple majority. So a quorum in here would be quite large, obviously. But a quorum in the county commission would be quite small. Me too. Let me mention what is not a meeting, a chance of social meeting. Now let me just give you a word of caution there. Please do not try to use your chance or social meetings to circumvent the act, and you all know that. So if you go to dinner with somebody else just so you can discuss matters that are becoming impediment before you, that would be a violation of the act, in my view. So also, if you go to number C4C there on page 3, you'll see that it's an exception. It's not a meeting if it's a convening of a public body. And this one really applies to our county commission because it's for administrative type matters that will not come before the commission. Most of you do not have both legislative and executive functions as part of your responsibilities. And if you have questions, you can always stop me here. We'll keep going quickly. We have a long agenda, I saw. On the next page, on page 4, you can have meetings. Obviously, you meet your notices requirements. You have to have at least 24 hours notice. You have to have an agenda, what's on the substance of the agenda, items on the agenda, excuse me. If you have regular meetings of the year, you have to publish a notice regarding that. Usually done towards the end of the year or the first of the year. So I think you're doing all those things. I think all that's being done by your secretary, and otherwise, if you want to look at those more specifics, you're welcome to. I suspect that you could have an emergency meeting among this board. Something happens at the lake, maybe you could have an emergency meeting. That just means you don't have to comply with the 24-hour notice requirement. However, you wouldn't have to, every member of this board would have to be contacted for that meeting. Agenda requirements, again, I'm not sure each one of you will be that involved with these. Eric and others in this board will be involved with those. But one thing I will mention to you is a caution, I think you already know this, but if someone comes and gives public comment that is not on your agenda, and you cannot take a final action on that comment. So if they ask you to do a certain thing, paint the color red of certain, certain structure or whatever, you cannot take action on that public comment, at least at that meeting. You can direct others to pursue that, but you have to put on for a future agenda for actual vote. Okay? I think sometimes the public misunderstands that, so just be able to be advised of that. Okay, next page.
Excuse me.
Yes.
How about a change on the agenda, 24 hours notice still, if there is a change on an agenda that was posted 72 hours prior, and then a change came, it still needs 24-hour notice? For
Yes, yes, I think it would. Now, it depends on if it's a substantive change. Now, for example, if you misspelled a name or something like that, I don't know that's a problem, but if you have...
But in addition,
Yes.
addition to
Yes.
a specific...
You should do that. I mean, that's, as an attorney, I would advise you to repost your notice on that. Yeah. And we've done that a number of times in Tech County.
It needs 24 hours still.
It should, yes, and otherwise I would advise you not to bounce it to the next meeting. Again, we're trying to make sure that everything's done openly, that lens I mentioned earlier, okay? Now, one thing on our minutes, one key thing is that it has to have a substance of a testimony given or comments given by the public. And so, again, that probably doesn't apply to each one of you, because you're not the ones drafting the minutes, but when you review them, just make sure you have at least a short substance of what was discussed at that meeting in those minutes. A closed meeting has to have a quorum present, properly noticed open meeting, 2/3 of you have to vote. It has to go to a closed meeting, vote to approve it. There are a number of closed meetings that you could have. One is in 10A, on page 5, is discussion of character, professional competence, or physical mental health of an individual or individuals. Sometimes we discuss that as personnel matters, otherwise related to, or it could be entities or companies that you work with that you're having some difficulties with. It could involve that. As you'll see later on, the record of that closed meeting is different than the record of other closed meetings. Others on B, 10B would be pending or reasonably imminent litigation, collective bargaining, the purchase of property, or the sale of property. Understand one thing on the sale of property is that has to be previously noticed, that part of the sale. You can't, if someone, it's a difficult thing because if someone comes in and makes an offer on a piece of property that the city or county owns or that the Lake Commission would own, unless that was previously noticed for sale, you cannot have a closed meeting on it. So what we do is we put those as surplus property, and then we have a closed meeting to discuss those things. The statute does require that it has to be previously noticed for sale in order to have a closed meeting on it. So it makes it a little difficult when you have somebody just comes in and makes an offer. We have this all the time. So I work with Richard Nielsen on those.
What if the property is private property and it's not for sale and the entity
it's your
is
property,
looking to
this
acquire?
itself, the counties, the cities, it's a Lake Commission property we're talking about here. Not if you're not to purchase property, that's different. If you want to purchase private property, you can have a closed session on that as well.
Okay.
But there is that one little nuance on the sale of public property, is that it has to be previously disclosed for sale. Okay, what cannot be decided in a closed meeting, an ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment? Now, you can discuss those things sometimes, depending upon if they fit in a certain closed meeting item. As I mentioned, if you have had a bad experience with a company and you might be able to discuss those in a professional competence type setting, but you can't make a decision. So just be advised of that. Okay, as I mentioned a minute ago, record of closed meetings. Typically, you keep a recording forever, and there's a date and time. We do not recommend you keep minutes anymore. You used to keep minutes years ago of closed meetings. I think you just have a recording. Now, on a closed meeting related to professional competence and also, I believe it's deployment of security personnel, that's a different kind of record for a closed meeting. That is just an affidavit by the chair. So if you are in fact having a closed meeting to discuss professional competence of an individual or individuals, that there is no recording kept, no recording even had. All you do is you have an affidavit of the chair for that. I think you probably all know that. So hopefully your attorneys are working with you on those things. Okay. Disruptive behavior. You can, if someone's being disorderly, you can have them removed from the meeting. That doesn't happen very often, I suspect, but it does happen. No, hopefully it doesn't happen very often. But so if someone is being disorderly, refusing to obey instructions, etc., you could have them removed.
Who can do the removal?
That's for us. We have a sheriff's deputy, obviously. We've had some of those at meetings. Often, if a sheriff's deputy shows up, there's no disorderly conduct because they're standing there. But it's honestly a hard question because you don't want to, as a board member, go down and have them physically removed. I think you'd want to call in somebody to do that.
But the decision to do that is made by
the board. Yep.
It'd be interesting. I mean, we've never had that circumstance, have we? Such an
And we've
unruly
had people
crowd.
disruptive.
Oh, we have.
We've had a number of folks that have been disruptive over the years. Some are upset about decisions that are made, obviously, and they might, it's personal to them. So we understand that. And I think the effective way I've seen most is if you can work to try to lower that level, if you will. But if they insist upon being disorderly, even threatening otherwise, then I think you need to make a phone call. Yeah, have security come in. So you should always have a security officer available. Doesn't necessarily mean it to be the building or otherwise, but at least available when you have your meetings, in my opinion.
Would we need to make that decision as a quorum before a phone call is made, or could Eric kind of pick up and say?
I think your chair could make that decision. Yeah, it doesn't say.
Takes a little nod of the head, like, go.
Yeah, it doesn't say as I recall, so I think you could do that. Again, that's a rare circumstance. It does happen, but it is very rare, and hopefully it doesn't.
I've never seen it on this council.
I mean, Utah County, we've had a lot of meetings. I've been to 1,000 meetings, public meetings, in my career, and very rarely have I seen anything. We've never had anyone actually removed. We've had someone threaten to be removed. Actually, it was a county employee, but during a budget discussion. But
I've seen it happen.
yeah, so it does happen. Hopefully, it doesn't happen too often. But you have to look at the circumstances. I think the chair could make that call. Okay, enforcement of the act. The county attorney's office, attorney general's office, both enforce the act, and that you have these annual trainings that are provided. There are penalties if you choose to violate the Open Public Meetings Act. You can have your action avoided by the court. You could be guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. I'm not aware of anyone in Utah County in the recent history that has been prosecuted for that, but there could be. So. Okay, I went through quite quickly, and that was kind of intentional because it said most of this board I'm aware of has probably had similar trainings, a lot. Are there any questions? I appreciate your questions so far. Okay, thanks for your.
Do you see any areas where
What's that?
Do you see any areas in your perspective where we need to tighten up a little bit, or?
Oh, I just think you have to be careful. In your situation here, with a large commission, it's pretty easy to have a discussion about items that are coming up. I think you just have to be careful, really careful. The Open Public Meetings Act is certainly meant to benefit the public and have information provided to the public, but it's pretty easy if you're just talking to have a discussion come up about things that are coming to the agenda. Now, again, that's not a quorum here, so it's not a problem for two of you, but I think in general you just got to be careful of that, and I think you'll get in trouble. And I think the public has a perception that if you're talking about things, then they're not getting a fair shake. or if you're texting or otherwise while they're up here or having sidebar discussions. I think the public views that as a negative, in my opinion. And I've heard that many times. Not that our county commission does that, but I was mentioning I've heard it in meetings and these kind of trainings before. So be careful.
I've often wondered that. I mean, we don't have large amounts of the public that attend, and we greatly appreciate those that do. I've wondered if that is because the means of communicating or letting them know about the meetings has been less than sufficient, that people that want to be here just don't know about it. Has there been any change in terms of types of notification, or are there things we should do to be
So this is
more
the minimum that I'm
notified?
providing you here. Certainly you can provide much more notice of your meetings. You know, often people post them on their websites, they'll post them in different places. They may even advertise them or get a newspaper to talk about some things that are coming up. Those are ways you can do it. You can certainly send an email out to everybody that's affected. There's lots of ways you can do things. What's in here is a minimum. It's not the maximum, so you can do more. And you'll have to decide what that is.
Okay.
Obviously, the more you do, the more expensive it is, because if you're having to take a staff time and other time and the cost sometimes associated. Something on mailers can be expensive, obviously, and things of that nature. I know some, like Utah County recently went to a YouTube presentation of our county commission meetings. Now, I will tell you that I do watch it if I'm not down in those meetings, but there's not a lot of watchers. Usually I've seen 4 to 5, maybe sometimes as many as 30. Yeah. But people may go back and watch it later on. That's okay. That's a good thing too. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for your time. Make sure you sign the certificate so you take it with you. And if I can be excused.
Please, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to our executive director's report for all of the items listed.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda for the report is lake level. As you're all aware, since our last meeting, there's been lots and lots of precipitation in our mountains. We don't take any credit for that, but we are excited about it. Right now, the lake is at 3.3 feet below full, which is a really good place for us to be right now, considering we're at 140% of average for precipitation in the mountains. And that's just for the Provo River. I wasn't sure quite how to account for, is it part of that?
It's similar.
Okay. So really good. The upper reservoirs are, I think, kind of where they want to hold them at this stage of the year. Maybe Mike or Gerard could speak better to that, but they hold those reservoirs. So Deer Creek can get held a little higher than Jordanelle because it has to prepare for whatever comes out of the mountain. And as I've watched those over the years, they kind of hold those until a certain date, and then they can fill them up. So we're in good shape. It would seem, if the spring continues as it's continuing, that we could see Utah Lake fill this year. But our water managers don't like to commit to things like that because the weather can be crazy and it can dry out all of a sudden and heat up too fast. So, but we're optimistic that the lake gets pretty close to full this year, so that at least from an access and full standpoint, the lake should be very usable. As for the algae side of it, we'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, water levels are looking really nice all across the state this year, which is exciting. Grants on 4.B. This year's grants have been issued and accepted for funding. So Utah County puts in a request from the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food for their ISM. This year that was for $165,000. The commission puts in a request from DNR's Watershed Restoration Initiative. This year that was for $163,000. Both ranked really well in the region, and so those should be available come July 1st. The county is also, as part of that project, has in-kind contribution of just under $60,000. And then there's a couple other partners, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, and the Utah Lake Commission also put some funding towards that. And so the overall project, and this is just for Phragmites removal and other invasives, so Russian olive and tamarisk that also is a bit of a problem down around the lakeshore. That's a $416,000 project for this year. Starting out right now, the Marsh Masters are out. The first one is up and running with the mower on the back. And from what I'm told, all the other parts are in for the second Marshmaster to get the mower installed. They're just, it's kind of a busy time of year, so they're juggling between getting prepped for summer motor pool and getting the second Marshmaster outfitted.
Is there any issue, like we've had in the past, with places mowing that it's not clogging up pumps or diversions?
There's a buffer zone around the pumps at the north end of the lake, and they just have to stay away from that.
Okay.
It can only be burned.
Yeah, you haven't heard from anybody else?
We've had no complaints. That earlier, I don't know, maybe the tail end of last year, we had a conversation with the folks at the pump house, and they said, "Oh, just be sure that you're not mowing it down or smashing it within this buffer area."
Okay, great.
So, and my guess is that the mowed version, unless it was stacked and floated in a pile, probably wouldn't be that problematic. I mean, it's really mulching it down small compared to the mats that are the historic crushing version.
Yeah. I was thinking even of some of the agricultural pumps and the mining pumps, but maybe you're not over in those areas yet.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I guess we'll hear as soon as they are, probably.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We could give you you have the map of the
Inflows.
Well, we could get you a map of the pumps we have permitted to, if that would be
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah, that would be good. So we're excited about that. The mowing is started kind of over on the northwest end of the lake. They've been doing some work down near the canal, but more kind of the other invasive works of getting rid of some of the tamarisk and such. They've been mowing and crushing right there near the Saratoga Springs HOA, so the very, very northwest corner of the lake. And then they'll slowly kind of work their way around through the rest of Saratoga Springs and then into Lehigh and work their way all the way down to Provo Bay as that happens. The expectation is that they'll be to the airport by fall. But they're still kind of getting their arms around how fast they can go, and once the second machine gets up and running, that'll obviously speed things up a lot. So we're excited about that. The Utah Lake Shoreline Improvement Capital Projects Fund request, we already discussed that, so I won't go into that again. That is simply the grant fund from our Capital Projects Fund of $30,000 that can help with projects. We will use the technical committee to review applications. We'll kind of issue a local type request for proposals from our lakeshore users and municipalities, and go from there as far as using our technical committee as a review entity for those proposals that come in to decide how to divide those funds up. Okay, and so this year, as we've done last year, sorry it sounds like a broken record, the priority area is 4,305 acres that starts at Saratoga Springs City Marina and wraps all the way down into Provo Bay, so all the way down to Springville. There's a secondary priority area that goes from that kind of the south end of Provo Bay down around Sandy Beach. And that area is just, it's open and it's just secondary in priority currently because we have this north end to worry about. But if the machines end up being faster than we thought, that's where they'll head. They'll just continue along southwest shore on the lake.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What would the lake level rising do to that treatment? I mean, that execution?
I guess it would prevent them from getting too far out because they don't operate as well mowing. You're not going to mow too deep into the water. But on the positive side, Phragmites also dies when it gets to a certain depth of water. So they'll kind of stay in the, they can mow right into the wet areas, but not to the point where they're, you know, do you have an idea, Richard, of how deep they can be mowing?
Probably between a foot and 18 inches of water.
Okay.
More in there.
So yeah, so that, I guess it'll reduce the area that they need to work on mowing right now, but the chemical treatment will come in again, and the helicopters will treat all that's visible above the water. It's right around September, and they'll treat all that's there along that priority again this fall. And then other invasives, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is tamarisk and Russian olive. These are being treated right now along the front of Vineyard, over by the American Fork Boat Harbor, and then Saratoga Springs. Much of that work is done from the Saratoga Springs City Marina, heading north through the canal to kind of stay on top of that until Saratoga Springs is able to pull the canal back and work on that as a trail. Maybe, Laura, do you have an update on?
I know they had a meeting on Tuesday, I think.
We talked about that on Tuesday in a council meeting.
Yeah, and I think they had a meeting with UDOT to go over the final. So I think as long we're looking for a little bit of extra funding, we had to mitigate for some wetlands near the HOA marina, but I think we're still moving forward. But I can't give you an exact timeline. I wasn't.
And maybe real quick, just describe what the end result is going to be.
So the infamous canal that runs along most of Saratoga Springs, the idea is that the canal will, in essence, be tipped back in. So there's the shoreline, then the canal, and then a berm where they excavated out the canal. And so that'll be tipped back in to restore connectivity with the shoreline to the lake, and then a trail will be constructed that will also allow, so not only allow people, or in some places the trail's already constructed, but widened and improved to not only allow recreation, but also allow access to treat the invasive species, such as the Phragmites and the tamarisk and things in there to restore what the lakeshore was.
Okay.
So it's been an interesting Army Corps process because they're looking, you have to have alternatives, but it's either you restore the shoreline and have a trail. You can't do one without the other. So it's been a little bit tedious, but I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, we sent out a survey a couple of weeks ago just saying, Army Corps of Engineers would love to hear that we want that canal filled in, and had mostly positive response back from that from the residents. There were some who were under the mistaken impression that the trail wasn't going to happen if the canal didn't get filled in, and really it was, no, the trail's going to happen, it'll just be closer to your houses and less convenient, I guess, for
and then
invasive species removal.
Yeah, and in some places there's not enough room. The trail, because we're getting federal funding for it, has to be a certain width, and we can't accommodate that in places unless we use the canal area.
Yeah.
Okay. And just so everyone knows, the canal is not nowhere near a pristine canal. It's a wet area between the shoreline and the lake that fills with weeds and
mosquitoes,
trash and mosquitoes.
Sometimes cougar.
It really is not a positive thing. It was a historic canal that was intended to allow for water to be pulled from the lake during the Dust Bowl era, and was used for a short period of time and then abandoned, and has never been a helpful thing since that point. So
one of the other issues is people have been draining their yards and their stormwater, like their French drains from their yards, into the canal, and so finding out that that's a big reason why there's always water in that canal. So we're also, as part of this project, remedying that situation.
How do you address that, Laura?
So, well, a lot of the yard drains obviously aren't permitted, and then some of the city's stormwater drains actually go in there. So we're trying to tie all those together and just have fewer points and actually hopefully treat the water better through a natural wetland instead of just dumping it into this canal.
Great. Okay, next up, Lake Restoration Solutions Project. Do you have a description of kind of where the Resource Review Board is on that?
So the Resource Review Team, which is made up of state agency experts, met with the project proponent in early January over the course of 2 days. We had 3 different meetings focusing on environmental issues, engineering issues, and then wildlife habitat and recreation. And we're able to ask them questions and have some dialogue. I need to get back on it, but the idea is that now those resource review specialists will review the project and figure out what they need to start moving forward to make a decision one way or the other. And so we'll package a request to the project proponent, and then they'll have a certain amount of time to respond back, and that could go back and forth for a while.
Do we have an update on their progress or work with Army Corps of Engineers?
I do not believe that they've engaged the Army Corps of Engineers at this point.
Okay. Walkara Way, and maybe Councilman Flake will talk about this as well, but this project, we've all heard about it now. This is kind of a master planned park and natural area along the south end of Vineyard down through Powell Slough, essentially to the north side of Utah Lake State Park. So large project area. The proponent is a private landowner that came and spoke at our last board, the Holdaways. That project is moving ahead. Initially what it does is it allows for grazing in that area to manage the Phragmites, and there will be an agreement set up that provides easement for a public trail down along kind of the shoreline throughout that entire area, and that I don't know, provides a legacy project for these families that own land that's undevelopable right now, but that does have potential for a really beautiful wetland park type environment. So we're facilitating meetings with all of the relevant entities that are involved in that. We've been working on pulling together some funding to help get fencing installed so that this pilot project on the Keith Holdaway property can be grazed to give everyone else in that area a view of how it looks when it's grazed and trimmed down nice. And so we think that we've gotten some funding from the local conservation district. I think it's the Alpine Conservation District to help with the fencing on that. And then a small portion of the Watershed Restoration Initiative grant will also provide fencing dollars so that we can get that enclosed, and then the landowner worries about managing the cows and keeping care of that part of it. So we'll keep you informed as things progress, but right now there's lots of good partners on it. Yes?
Are they going to be grazing all the way down to the lake?
The plan is to graze to what would be the edge of the east edge of the trail. So there would be some kind of fence along that trail alignment, and then in front of that will likely need to continue to be managed through the Watershed Restoration grant dollars by Utah County, mowing and so forth. If there's some agreement that it works out to get cows out there for a short period of time, that'll be something that we work out down the road. But for now, the idea is that cows are kept behind that kind of trail line alignment.
If they do move to the shoreline, will you
Get a permit?
yes, please?
Yeah. Okay, and then for anyone that has not had a chance to go see that project and walk the shoreline where the trail would go to get a vision of that, because it really is an amazing thing. Right next to major population, you feel like you are in the middle of nowhere with birds and pretty beautiful wetland areas. On April 11th, you have the date and time. The location to meet would be Sleepy Ridge Golf Course, and the holdaways will be offering a tour of that project area.
Eric, by what date do you need to know an RSVP so we know how many people are going to be there?
Anytime before then would be just fine.
Okay.
So it's informal. They're very accommodating to kind of help get people down there. From the golf course, you can get really close to the start of the trail area, so they manage that golf course and kind of can help you get down onto it. So do let me know in advance if you'd like to attend that, and I can make sure that they're prepared for extra folks.
I had the opportunity to go down and kind of take that tour with them, and it was great to see, actually be down in there and see what exactly they're talking about. And it's, like Eric said, rather surprising how isolated it is next to such a large population center. So it's if you haven't had the opportunity, I recommend you go down and see that. We've got some good ideas.
We went when the lake level was relatively low. Do we think that, does it change much with, I mean, does that area have more swampy areas with the rising level?
Their claim is that it does not change a lot. There is a pretty substantial berm, just a natural sandy berm out there close to the lake, close to the high water mark. Mm-hmm. And as long as it's draining properly, which historically it did, and there's maybe a little bit of work to be done on that, it stays fairly dry within most of that area. Some of the Powell Slough, there's natural wetland area portions to that, but that would be something that could stay the same and be enhanced so that you get more birds in there and that type of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, Lincoln Beach. The commission ran a survey for the Lincoln Beach / Lincoln Point. We submitted those survey results. There was over 500 respondents, and so those went to Richard and the other county folks. They're now just, maybe you could provide a quick update on that.
The survey that the Lake Commission did was really helpful for us, and I was impressed at the number of people that responded to it. It overwhelmed me really to see how many people were aware of it and had interest in it. Rob Moore had mentioned we bought about 17 acres just north of the Lincoln Beach Marina. It's right out on Lincoln Point. Currently, we don't have any funding set aside for it, but we are working on taking the survey results and trying to formulate a master plan for that area. See what kind of improvements we can do and what kind of a time frame we can do them in. With improvements there at Lincoln Beach and then also around the point, trying to have some additional camping areas. There is a warm springs around on the north side of the point that's very popular with the fishermen, having some access in there. So you have other folks that express interest in it, please send them our way. We'd love to hear what they're thinking. And we'll
Richard, I assume that the county commissioners and whoever else would be involved would come up kind of with a master plan like we've done for the state marina, like we've done for the American
that's what we're
Fork
working on right now.
Else.
Yep.
Okay. That's great. It would be good to see and have that phasing there and available so we can start to look at how it can help. Okay.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and then we're going to have Councilman Flake talk a little bit about the Vineyard Beach improvements.
We, in Vineyard, as you know, we front the lake. And we look at that as one of the glowing moments that we could develop. And our development is happening so fast, as I was discussing before the meeting. I was elected to our city council 4 years ago, and that was 250 people. Now we're at 15,000. So we're growing exponentially, and if we don't do something fast, all that land's going to be gobbled up by hungry developers with condos. Mm-hmm. And that's our great fear. We have a project that I don't know when it began, but the county developed a small beach area at the north end of our city land, and it's kind of declined into a mess. The picnic tables that were there were swiped last month by somebody scrounging for metal. It is not a reputable part of our town. The police, our sheriff's department goes there often. because it's so isolated. So we, upon the presentation by some gentleman, I don't think he's here today, last year wanting more non-powered access to the lake, I was discussing it with our planner, and we put in an application for a grant to develop that somewhat declined part into a non-powered access point. So we've come up with engineering plans that show a vehicle access with a gate, a boardwalk, improved number of cabanas, cleaning up the sand that's there, putting in a parking lot by our access road so that the people can actually use the lake at that point. Eric and Ben braved the microclimate of the lake last week and came down and looked at it, as my assistant engineer about froze to death. But I don't think he was familiar with what happens when the wind blows off that lake.
It's frigid.
He is now. We walked through the plan, and we kind of expanded upon what we want to do. All parties there seem quite amenable to it, so we've come in and tweaked our master plan for that area, and we'll be presenting it to some people in the coming week and asking for more money, of course, since Vineyard is the poor sister of the county. Well, almost. So we have great hopes that it turns out well.
Thanks. And the grant that they put in for was the Utah Office of Outdoor Recreation grant. So we'll cross our fingers for you that comes through. It really is a great location and great access point, kind of centrally located. And it isn't just that beach, but also some cleanup efforts along the existing trail there in Vineyard that we're excited to see come forward and really improve that so that you get more people using it regularly and less of the crowds that attract the sheriff's department. Okay, real quick, just a couple more updates. Spring field trips are April 23rd, 24th, and the 30th, and then May 1st. Those are the ones that take place down at the Utah Lake State Park. There's lots of schools signed up, and Sam has the agenda for those schools packed with 12 or 13 presenters. So we're excited about that. It's always a fun time of the year to see bus loads of kids down there enjoying the lake. We'll hope for good weather. We also have some partners, volunteers working on some designs for us for some t-shirts and things like that we'll be selling down at the Visit Utah Lake, Visit Explore Utah Valley at the convention center. They've agreed to sell some t-shirts and things. It really is just designed to promote the lake and be a self-sustainable promotion tool for us. So once we get those designs ready, we'll show them to you before we start selling them. But they should be just some fun, cool designs to get people excited about loving Utah Lake rather than contrary. So we're excited about those. That we recently with Division of Water Quality posted a request for information for treatment solutions for algal blooms on Utah Lake. We got some really good proposals in. We reviewed those with Jim and kind of a review team. There was enough good proposals that we would like to swap or switch over to a request for proposals for pilot projects. And so, Jim, do you want to talk briefly about kind of what those would look like?
Yeah, so we met last week and discussed some of the options that we might take. We kind of wanted to put out a request for a proposal that might leave it open for multiple solutions, because we got kind of different categories of possible treatments, from chemical to biological to mechanical, and we would like to be able to, be able to choose among those, even though they're quite different and may have different costs. And because of state purchasing rules, cost is always a factor. But I had a conversation with our purchasing agent yesterday that might give us some options where we might be able to select the one of our choice, as well as maybe multiple projects to compare to each other. And as we discussed last week, I think using it as a demonstration project would be the best idea, rather than enter into a long-term contractual process. So we can evaluate it and then revisit it.
So the idea is that, let's say we choose 3 or possibly 4 of these proposals that come in, we can select a number of the marinas, and we'll kind of evaluate all the access points around the lake, not just the marinas, but there's a couple others that could potentially be used to test a pilot of these solutions, and just have it be used for 4 months of the summer to take care of algae just to that marina. If we're not hoping for algae, but generally speaking, we see some at least in those marinas, and this would be a way for them to demonstrate the effectiveness of that solution. So the action item associated with that is that the Utah Lake Commission is proposed to be the entity or the sponsor of that request for proposal. The funding for that is a portion of the legislatively appropriated dollars for Utah Lake water quality issues from a whole year ago. So the funding's in place for that, but the commission would be the requester of those proposals. And so if the commission is, if the board is okay with us being the...
Oh, no, I don't want to interrupt.
Oh,
for us
being the sponsor of that request for proposal, that would be the motion that we would present. And did you have a comment?
I just wanted to add to that we're also very cognizant of the fact that we want to make sure we're permitting this properly, and so we'll be working with Laura, and we'll be working with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the June Sucker, the issues with that and any restrictions that might occur there, as well as if there's any addition of chemicals or anything, we have to permit that, and so it has to be safe. And so we're just wanted to let you know that we're looking at that very closely.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
So when you say it's the money that the state, is that the $500,000 that we're talking about?
Yes. So it wouldn't necessarily use, it's not intended to use all of that. We're envisioning maybe a third of that or something like that to fund the pilot's portion, the pilot portion of this. But yeah, it would come through those dollars.
And then, without seeing these solutions, are they basically, once the bloom has happened, how to deal with it, or some of them preventative, or is it kind of a combination?
Yes.
Okay.
So some of them prevent. So some of the mechanical ones, you turn on the mechanical system, and it prevents the propagation of algae blooms. Some of them are more of a treatment to an existing bloom or a collection system for the existing bloom, but there's a kind of a spectrum of solutions. So it would be to test all of those as they work.
So then, as part of this RFP that's going out, is that going to be, you talked about kind of there's different levels of cost for the different, so you're going to have them kind of like UDOT does in categories, where you have them apply for like a certain category, and then you determine within a category we're going to move forward with this one or that one or whatever?
That's a good question. We're still kind of working it out with the purchasing side of things. We really don't have a sense of what the costs are, because the RFI that we just went through, that was not a requirement of that.
Right.
So it's kind of a big unknown for us. And being a demonstration project, we hope, and I'll put the suggestion into it, that because we've had this feedback from some of the vendors out there, that they would like to just demonstrate this for us. And so there may be some some economy of scale that we can arrive at that could benefit us if they wanted to demonstrate their solution. So we'll see how that comes out of the proposals.
And so in the RFI, you got, in theory, some qualifications and backgrounds of the different companies. And so is this next process going to be a combination of qualifications-based and cost-based?
Yes, most definitely. Because I wasn't fully satisfied with some of the qualifications, to be honest. The RFI was much more general kind of request for information, and the RFP is going to be much more specific.
Okay.
So that they have to jump through more hoops and provide more information. We're asking for, we can't just take their word that something's safe.
Right.
They have to demonstrate it. They have to tell us exactly what's in their product. And whereas the RFI, it was proprietary and what they were giving their information.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I comment?
Also on those, go ahead. I just say on those RFPs that will come in, he said some might just want to do it just to demonstrate. It would still be nice to know a cost analysis of that, obviously. So yes, it's maybe free as they're demonstrating it to us, but really what's it going to be in the end, obviously. That would be part of that.
That's a good point. I'll make sure that's part of it.
Yeah. Please, Mark.
I really like this concept. So working with UVU and the entrepreneurship and the innovation section, I mean, clearly if there was a solution, we would already be using it. But we're dealing with challenges that are, require innovation. We've got to look at the problem. We've got to come up with possible solutions. We've got to prototype and try those to see if any of these can be effective. I love that there's been a review body that can at least assess the feasibility or the potential viability of it. I love that we're looking to put some funding towards trying some of these ideas. I think we need to be really leading the charge and trying to say, let's not just sit back and wait. Let's try some things and see if we can use the intelligence and the innovation in this community to find a solution to a problem that has yet eluded us, yet has such a significant impact on our community. So I would love to, if you need us to make a motion, I would be glad to make a motion on that from that standpoint. Or if you're waiting from, what is it you need? Okay. I don't know if there's any other discussion, but I really appreciate the work that's been done to start this process, to garner ideas and just to really start moving this forward.
Okay, with that, I'm ready to accept a motion.
Is there specific language that you need?
Specifically that the Utah Lake Commission be the sponsor for or the requester for the RFP.
Yes.
I think is the main part of that.
I would so move.
I second.
Okay. Got a first, a second. Any other discussion on the motion? Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Carries unanimously. Excellent. Okay.
Thanks.
Next up.
The last point, we are working on developing a vision document, so a condensed version, I guess, of the general plan for the Utah Lake Commission. The vision document, the purpose behind it is to evaluate both the commission as it's doing its work, and then also to evaluate the lake for its strengths and weaknesses, and kind of give direction to the commission for what you're interested in seeing today. Where we should be pushing hard and where we should be kind of not as focused right now, but to really help us as a commission and staff focus our efforts. So we've kind of put together a SWOT analysis. We put that by the technical committee, and what we'd like to do is just send that document out. We'll kind of brush it up a little more. It'll still be a draft document. Send it out to the board and give you guys an opportunity to review that and put your ideas on paper to help us understand what your vision is for the commission moving forward as it applies to improvements or enhancements down at the lake. So that will be coming as a follow-up. We'll include it in the minutes to the meeting. If you could take some time to kind of read through that, it's short. We've tried to keep it as short as possible. I think we're at 2 pages right now. Maybe we flesh it out and it ends up being 5 or 6, but we want to keep it a short, succinct document to really kind of focus our efforts and use that in concert with the general plan. So just be watching for that. Well, we won't go into too much detail on that right now. We're a little bit short on time for presentations.
Okay,
That'll
very good.
be done.
Sam, you're up.
Speaking of keeping it short, mine will be short, I'm sure.
Excellent.
Just 3 things I wanted to update the board on. The first being the Utah Lake is My Lake campaign. So this is something we presented last year to the board. There were about a dozen focuses, if you will, underneath this campaign. Just wanted to update you on a couple. One was that we wanted to participate more in the local city summer festivals. So I actually, this week, was able, I think we're signed up for the Cedar Hills Family Festival. Say that one first, so I can catch you on your way out. I think we have plans for the Highland Fling as well. I plan on Woodland Hills Days again in the fall. Who else have we reached out to? We're looking at Steel Days currently to see if that's an option as well. And then we're actually doing the Lehigh City Expo here. The first one we'll be going to this year. So I think total, if I remember my count, there's a few I forgot, I think it's 7 that we're going to be able to attend to have our booth. At a few of those, we'll actually have Scott Daly from Division of Water Quality with us to talk specifically about the Utah Lake Water Quality Study as well. So we're kind of partnering our efforts as the commission with that study, with Division of Water Quality, to promote that study itself. As well as under that campaign, like Eric said, we're working on the t-shirt designs and such. We're maintaining a variety of our other events already underneath it, and then I don't remember what the other one was, I'm forgetting it. Well, I guess on the next, internships. So we've done internships in a variety of ways. Normally we've had at least one intern work with us during the summer. We've occasionally been able to bring in one or more. And then we've also used the BYU on-campus internship program that they operate through their business school. So we are in the middle of an on-campus internship program with BYU right now. They are actually helping us develop 2 key things I'd like to hit on. One, they're actually helping us develop a volunteer program. So they're developing a volunteer handbook, an agreement that volunteers could sign for liability and such, but with the intent of developing our own ongoing pool of volunteers that could be utilized at cleanups, at events. We've also kind of diversified it to other skill sets like graphic design or WordPress or grant writing and other things to try and help find volunteers who are interested in the lake and have a few hours that they can try and help us accomplish more than we as the commission staff can accomplish by ourselves. That internship team is also working on developing what's called a brand ambassador program. This is commonly used by businesses to promote products. So we're actually tweaking that idea and using it for people who love the lake to organize them within a program that will help generate more organic, positive communication about the lake that's coming from the residents who go there regularly and love the lake and can talk more about that. So we're trying to help provide a voice for those people and a sense of organization with that. In regards to internships as well, so for this summer, we're actually changing our summer internship a little bit. We're going to be hiring, we just closed the application for 1 seasonal paid position, but then we're also looking to hire 2, as many as 4, but my goal is 2 this year, unpaid interns, which we've not really done before. So we're structuring things a little bit differently. I actually met with Provo City's special events coordinator who operates a year-round internship program with 2 to 4 unpaid interns, and kind of took some of their best practices, and hopefully they'll do well. I think for both positions I had about a dozen applicants, so we'll be reviewing those in the next week or so and looking to hire soon. And then we will continue with the on-campus internship program. We're reviewing ideas right now for the fall semester so that we can have another team of 5 interns at BYU working on some other project ideas for us. And then the third point I put on there are monthly media packets. So this is a once-a-month email that goes out to the public information officer or social media manager for most of your organizations, as well as a few others. That just lets them know what topics are going on at the lake, whether that's events that are coming up or seasonal topics such as spring runoff or when algae occurs. That's a group we'll utilize. The packet's done well. We revamped it a little bit in the fall last year, so now what used to be is we sent out an image and text and hashtags and other things that could be used on social media. Now the biggest significant change we made was that we're scheduling on our social media and just telling these agencies, hey, on such and such date, there's going to be a post on our account in regards to this topic. Please reshare it at that time. Two reasons why we did that is A, just to simplify things further. It's helped, I think, since we've done that, we've had an increase in the agencies sharing it. And the second reason being to establish the credibility, if you will. We had an issue with Saratoga Springs last year. They shared something and suddenly became the victim of a variety of upset comments about Phragmites treatment, when in all reality, their communications team, not only do they not have all the details, but they shouldn't have to be responsible for answering to all that. So we've decided to change that tactic so that people know the commission is that source and can hence direct their questions or concerns or positive feedback to us on that. Otherwise, we've seen a lot of innovations in our communications, and we're really looking to try and leverage every opportunity we have, and we've seen a lot of growth in our social media accounts, and I think I'm most excited about these city festivals, going to them, being able to participate. Oh, and Splash Days, that's one of the ones I forgot. We're doing Splash Days as well in June. And I look forward to those face-to-face interactions with the public. Last year, the 2 festivals we did, we had a lot of great conversations with people. But that's what I've got for you today. Any questions? Or yes, please.
I was just wondering if you had had a chance to reach out to McKay Isham. He's the new Executive Director of Internships at UVU. They're also looking for opportunities for students.
That name specifically, no. With our 2 summer positions, I ran them through Christine Farnsworth, who's specifically over outdoor recreation internships. And then I don't remember the name, but I sent it specifically to their public relations program as well.
Yeah,
so I wasn't aware of this name.
Yeah, I will send you his contact.
Yes, I would appreciate it.
He's over all internships for all majors.
Sure.
We may be able to utilize a variety of majors.
Definitely, and I agree. I think that would be a great help. I really appreciate you bringing it up. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, water quality updates. Please, Jim.
As you're all aware, we've engaged a science panel to evaluate the data we have, the studies that need to be looked into for developing site-specific criteria for the lake to improve condition and reduce harmful algal blooms, etc. But I can't remember what your last update was because I may not have been here, but most recently we hired a consultant, Tetra Tech, who has helped a number of states develop nutrient criteria nationwide. And they are on board to assist us with a number of tasks that we lack some staff support for. So they're going to be working on compiling and coming up with data analysis that's required to support the science panel. They're building sort of a conceptual framework to help us understand the ecology of the lake, and they are working on uncertainty analysis, because ultimately I think with all the studies that have been done and will be done under the science panel, there's always a level of uncertainty that we need to be able to communicate to stakeholders like yourself on where the science is and what decisions can we make from the information we have. And they're also, I think, evaluating some of the existing modeling efforts and how can we augment them going forward, and just in general support the science panel in their work. And so this last meeting, we had a number of presentations from science panel members on ongoing studies. I think at this point we discussed a number of things I just went over, but we also have recently, I think, finished a compilation of the data with a few outliers so that they can get started on their analysis and have that available, and looking at sampling plans for this next season. Eric, if I'm missing anything, I wasn't at the entire meeting, so.
No, so they identified a number of studies that could be started this very summer that are kind of the most pressing issues that are we know what is needed and we know what we're lacking, and they're projects that could happen immediately. So those were identified at the most recent meetings, and so those Division of Water Quality will issue a request for those studies to be completed this summer, and then they're also looking at the other data gaps that might need a couple years of data, and those will be started here in the near future as well.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Signs?
Signs, please.
Oh, signage, the next thing. So this is the longest, shortest project I've ever worked on.
Yeah, seriously.
But the latest update we have is the signs we've had for a couple months now, and it was winter, so they weren't able to install them given conditions, but they were picked up last week, so by the contractor who has been who is going to install them for. So they may be installing them any day now if they're not already working on that. So that's the latest update.
Okay. Any other water infrastructure? Anything else?
I think that's the
it.
next
We're good.
topic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Who's got that?
Thanks.
Do you need a break for this?
So, I'm Gerard Yates, Central Utah Water. My responsibilities, I oversee all things water quality and finished water deliveries. And I have a lot of slides, and I'm going to go through them quickly. This is about a 45-minute presentation. I'll do that in less than half of that time. And so you'll see me going right along. So next slide, please. So if you're not familiar, there's the mission of the Central Utah Water and developing and delivering high-quality water is an important part of what we do. Next slide. And of course, we cover a large area, and basically one of the things we do is we deliver drinking water from forest to faucet. Next slide. And in our efforts of source water protection, one of the interesting things, of course, we own none of our watershed. Next slide. And so in order to protect water quality, this is generally the approach. Comes through American Water Works Association and starts with multiple barrier approach, and basically that's if you can protect each part, you can protect public health. This is, first of all, source water protection might be the most important, because if you don't put it in, we don't have to take it out in the end. Next slide. And now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about risk, and one of the risks that we've been experiencing this year to water quality is wildfires and source water protection. Next slide. And again, the challenge of going from forest to faucet. Next. I'm going to take you on a little trip as the water comes down the Provo River watershed, going towards Utah Lake, and this is something we do. We actually start on the other side of the drainage and bring the water through by transbasin diversion, bring it in from the Uinta Mountains, part of the Central Utah Project, because that's just exactly what we do. We collect snow melt and bring it from the east side of the state, where there's a lot of water, to the Wasatch Front. And next slide. And there's something here I want you to see if you can pick out all along each one of these. We operate and maintain mountain storage reservoirs. Next. Another, that's still water. Next. As the water is coming down towards Utah Lake, there's Jordanelle, and you'll notice there's something in common all along. Next. Upper Provo heading towards Deer Creek. Next. Deer Creek Reservoir. Next. Coming down Provo River. And here's the hint of what I'm looking for. Some of you have already caught that, Forrest Gump, and keep going. Next slide. And of course, the Olmsted diversion, where we now divert to multiple treatment plants. And the thing that is in common here with all of these is the forested lands that come right down to the water. Next slide. And of course, this year with wildfires, I'll take you on a little journey of some of what we've experienced in local, and of course we cover 8 counties, so I'll share a little bit of outside of Utah County also. Next slide. That water comes down and goes to treatment plants. Here are 3 treatment plants that we own and operate. Next. And what I'm really talking about is wildfire impacts to water quality and source water protection. Next slide. And the way we've been doing that, as I mentioned, we don't own any part of the watershed, and for the last 30 years we've been trying to protect the watershed, the water quality, through a cooperative effort with the Provo River Watershed Council in this area. and our mission next, and our partners. And you'll notice that one of the things about this the particular Provo River Watershed Council, our Provo River Watershed is about somewhere between 65 and 75%, or 65 to 70% of the state's population relies on that watershed to deliver water for drinking water. Next slide. So stakeholders around the table, with all of the different stakeholders you can see, and in a cooperative effort to protect the water quality. Next slide. And part of what we do as a watershed council, we sample and we monitor. That's a couple of our district employees. We monitor the water quality and look for change over time and how we can enhance or improve. Next slide. Some examples. So this started back in 1981, and actually the council started with being the Jordanelle Technical Advisory Committee back in 1984 with the responsibilities as part of constructing Jordanelle. This was actually Governor Matheson wrote a letter to the EPA when we were going to construct Jordanelle. There was a concern about water quality in Deer Creek, and this was a commitment that we had managed Jordanelle to protect water, preserve water quality. And these are some of the ways that we go about preserving water quality for beneficial uses. And you'll see through the council we provide resources to accomplish these tasks and others. Next slide. We participated in like Main Creek Restoration, a little example of a project. This is, of course, up at Wallsburg, and the interesting thing is this is a project with NRCS that restored stream banks and protected that. Of course, next slide. That little stream going in was impaired for total phosphorus, and with this project, this is the first round of testing, showed that there's, with the success of that project, with a 63% total phosphorus reduction going into Deer Creek, which is going to go down and end up in Utah Lake, of course. And, and that's a concern for all of us. Next slide. It was also high E. coli numbers, and you see the reduction. Next slide. So another thing we see that impacts water quality. This is a cascade fire. And remember, one of the things we're concerned about is what does this do to the drinking water downstream, and it also is going to flow past the diversion. This is also ending up in Utah Lake. But here was the cascade fire, and initially when this came out, the efforts indicated that, well, the Bear team came in, assessed it, and said, really, we're not going to do any erosion control on this fire. We actually, as a council, joined together and was able to help leverage politically to get some funding to do some erosion control. Now, I will tell you, when they come in, they did silt dams. There's some things that happened. For example, on this fire, they put a lot of erosion control measures in. I observed that happening. They then suspended grazing for 2 years and reseeded. And then you can see in the upper left-hand corner, that was spring runoff. And I have to say, we couldn't treat that water. That's Little Deer Creek going into the Provo River. And I thought, well, that was a failure. All that effort and the money, and yet that's what happened as soon as the snow started coming off that area. And then later, a few months later, I walked up and evaluated what happened with hundreds of silt dams. They were all full. They did their job. Wasn't enough of them, perhaps, but it could have been much worse. And so really that was a success. Next slide. Those were our partners with Wasatch County, NRCS, and the Forest Service, and the council. Next slide. Now, we've had other fires in that same area and around the watershed, and the difference is in smaller fires we didn't help implement control measures for erosion, and though we've had significant impacts just from smaller fires. Next slide. So, been asked, well, how big of a fire really impacts water quality? Well, this past summer, right on the west side of Deer Creek Reservoir, there was a little fire. Because the Forest Service had resources out fighting the Dollar Ridge fire, they were able to bring helicopters over really quick and one tanker, and they put this out, and it was only 300 acres, and they said, okay, 300-acre fire right there, is it going to impact water quality? And I thought, nah, you know, how big of an impact can 300 acres have, especially since we have Pole Creek that came across in Utah County, 100,000 acres. 300 acres, well, next slide please. We had this little storm event came across right after my prediction that this wouldn't be a big issue, and this is the water coming off a little 300-acre fire going into, again, coming down and going into the Provo River. And you can see it's somewhat significant. Oh, I don't know why this, you might have to look over your shoulder because I'm not sure why that one's not working, but this one is working, sorry. Next slide. And of course this is coming right down to treatment plant here in Orem, and also going to go to Salt Lake County treatment plants. And this is our Don A. Christiansen here. It's a 100 million gallon per day water treatment plant, and that's what's going right to that. So we actually have an early warning system up at Olmsted. We knew this was happening. We were prepared for it. Next slide. And then if you'll click it one more time, you'll show two at the same time. Both videos will run. This normally would be nice, clean blue water coming into the plant. That's what it looks like as a result of that little 300-acre fire. The 300-acre fire, and this is, but we were prepared for it. And next slide. And so what happened, this little chemical feed pump is feeding, we went from a normal dose of 9 milligrams per liter of ferric chloride to collect all the dirt to 150. Next slide, you'll just start this little jar test showing what's going on. And so that shows you how the impact of and cost, and next slide. But at the end of the day, because we were prepared and because we have early monitoring and we have the resources, that the turbidity went from 4 NTU to 459 NTU coming into the treatment plant. In other words, that's a measurement of how much dirt and sediment is coming in from that fire. But our water quality goals, we do, that's just right over skate. And the end of the story is it didn't impact finished water quality at all. We sent out great water quality, but it was because of the efforts we put in. Next slide. However, this is looking at solids production of all the stuff that we had to filter out and remove, and it shows this is just shows the daily peak of all the solids production. Next slide. In other words, that little event that just happened from a 5-minute rainstorm ended up in that much production of solids. Next slide. Now, let's talk about Pole Creek fire. Of course, we know that this was an interesting fire. There was 5,000 of homes that were evacuated for a couple of weeks. Some of my neighbors in South Utah County and friends were evacuated from their homes. One thing you might not know about that fire, coming down Payson Canyon on the top right, on the left you see the fire up above. That would be Elk Ridge, and coming down Payson Canyon is a natural gas little station. And one of the two pipelines that feeds the Lakeside power plant down here in Vineyard, well, that has two natural gas lines. One of them comes down Payson Canyon. They had to evacuate that line, and so only half of the natural gas was available, and which meant their capacity was cut in half. And of course, we provided the water to that facility, and they didn't need as much water, and they also could produce only half the amount of power that was needed. And that was just kind of a side note of an impact from fire that people wouldn't even be on your radar. Next slide. How about just a funny little fire? This one was Sundance. I received a phone call coming about this fire in October of this past year, and keep going. And what happened is we work together so that we get the communication so that when anything happens in that canyon, whether it be a spill event, a truck goes over, a car's in the river, anything, well, North Fork Fire, they called and said, hey, we have a fire, and there's some foaming agent in North Fork. Now remember, North Fork comes right down into the Provo River, right above Olmsted Diversion, and now it's going to about 1 million people to drink the water. And so, as I went up, this is what that little North Fork stream normally looks like. Next slide. And this is what it looked like when I arrived. And that doesn't look good, does it? So next slide. And they had this little house fire, and they had been spraying, mixing a foaming agent with it and spraying onto this home, and they'd put about 125,000 gallons on that fire, and it's all right next to the stream, and actually it's asphalted right up and around that cabin that was burning, and all of the foaming agent was running down that and going right into North Fork. Next slide. And so what did that do? I looked, and there was nothing in that foaming agent that you'd want in your drinking water. So we shut down the Olmsted Diversion, let that go, and then we monitored that until it had passed by the Olmsted Diversion, as it went on down to Utah Lake. But we didn't put it in the pipeline and send it out for people to drink. Next slide. Big wildfire season. As you all know, this was early on. It was much more than that. Next slide. Now, we cover a large area. We're in Duchesne County and Uinta County, and here's one out in Duchesne County and also Wasatch County. It covered 2 county lines, the Dollar Ridge Fire. Next slide. July 1st it started. It burns an area, and usually people think that when there's a fire, yeah, this fire event, and as soon as it's put out, great, everybody's happy, right? No, if you're a water quality person, once the fire's put out, now you're just holding your breath because you know bad things are coming. Next slide. And this is what happened in 2 little rainstorms that basically just came in two canyons. Now, after this fire was put out, we went and met, and the Bear team came in, that's the Burn Area Assess team, and they said, you know what, there's no erosion control measures we can do in this area. They said the slopes are too steep, and the soils are too erosive, and consequently, you're just going to live with it. And you're going to live with it for years and years. And so that's these little that's normally a nice road going up there. It's gone, washed out. Keep going. And we deliver a large portion of the water from Starvation Reservoir into much of Duchesne County. And you can see as that rainstorm happened, normally Starvation Reservoir is very pretty and blue, and you can see clear down on the bottom right-hand side, you can see how far all of that sediment went and as it's moving through from that little storm event, because it's almost to the top of that bottom right-hand picture. Next slide. And of course we have a treatment plant that we pump water, and we actually use that Starvation Reservoir as our settling basin to produce so that we get better water. And this event was a game changer for our treatment plant. Next slide. Because as that fire, after the fire with the sediment, now you see before and after, and you can see what happens with the water quality going into that reservoir. Next slide. And this is kind of a little video. It shows you, here's the fire, and everybody comes and says, okay, round 1. And then everybody rallies around to put out the fire, and then this kind of represents round 2, which is maybe worse. Because now the rain and the sediment and everything that comes in. Next slide. So what happens with this? Well, coming down, blue ribbon trout fishery, like we have on the Provo, but this is coming down from Strawberry Reservoir, heading down, and of course, you see on the upper right-hand side, the fire burns homes and structures. And then the floodwaters come down, and Wildlife Resources indicates that all of the fish are dead in that blue ribbon fishery after that one event. Now, I don't know, you start thinking, I look over at Mike and say, what happens when you burn up the watershed up Hobble Creek? And then you have a rain event. And anything important that comes down Hollow Creek, Mike? Yeah. Maybe so. And so you look at the dead fish. Next slide. This is the water going into the reservoir and and this is the water going out of Starvation Reservoir. You see that we didn't really sample it, but I can tell you going in that's more mud than water. It's, I don't know how many thousand NTU, which is what we measure, but I know it was over 1,000 coming out of the bottom of the dam, and that's normally never more than 2 or 3. And the concern for us, next slide, is we pump water right next to that. We're pumping water up to our treatment plant that delivers water from everyone from Duchesne to Roosevelt and in all of the area. That's a direct filtration plant, which means we don't have a sedimentation process because we use the lake as our sedimentation process. And how long is this going to impact us? Well, what happened is you just brought all of that sediment, and it's not just turbidity, it's not just dirt, it is all of the nutrients that you just filled that lake with. And those nutrients came in and they fill up that lake, and every time you have more water moving through, it resuspends all the nutrients, and now with the nutrients, there's this thing called algae. And for a treatment plant, you get filter clogging algae, you get taste and odor causing algae, and a new event that we saw this year that we haven't seen before. Next slide. So, short-term water quality, it's turbidity, and it's filtration, and it's nutrients, and it's algae growth, and it's cyanobacteria, and we're regulated on other things, and TOC, all the organics coming in. It almost tripled the total organic carbons, which cause disinfection byproducts when you add that to chlorine and taste and odor, and keep going. And this is what we have never seen in that lake, cyanobacteria. And this year we saw, this is not a huge, it's kind of a wind-blown area, but in the end, that's what happened. Well, you have all the nutrients, you lost. Normally, that's clear, it's deep, and the green algae are able to outcompete the blue-green with everything becoming cloudy and dirty, and high nutrients. We saw for the first time a little area of cyanobacteria. And next slide. And how long is this going to last? Well, everywhere around the country that experiences this, you change the nature of water quality with a fire, and as you burn up a coniferous forest, and then eventually in 20, 25 years, you get more broadleaf plants and into deciduous, and the leaf litter changes the water quality, and it changes everything long term on what you're going to see, which is from a water treatment standpoint and water quality standpoint, it's a game changer for long term. Next slide. So for our little treatment plant out there, it means those are the processes we have. It doesn't work anymore. Next slide. There shows you side by side what it normally looks like, what it does look like, and how far all that sediment pushed in. And remember, this was just 2 little storm events in 2 drainages on this watershed of several hundred. So, next slide. So it means we're going to have to, this plant has to be, we're designing right now to construct it so that it's going to be a conventional flux head. Next slide. And we were looking for money, and we went and looked and see, and it's going to be a $12 to $14 million project, and we're investigating FEMA money and NRCS money and how you do all this, but you know, we're going to spend money. Next slide. And so what did we do? Well, our watershed council, we've been very effective at doing a lot of things. But we recognize that we have a couple of our partners that we haven't really been engaging, and we need to in the future, and we've reached out to them, those that own the forested lands around our water, where we can leverage financial and political clout, and we are moving forward, engaging the Forest Service and State Division of Forestry and Fire. Next slide. And with those new partnerships, instead of just okay, how are we going to deal with this? We're looking at prevention measures. Next slide. And so we've identified that these are some of the prevention measures we are going to pursue. Next slide. And what we're really looking for us in operating facilities, we have we have the reactionary, which is we're always putting out fires, which is high risk. And we're working with those that own the forested lands to say, you know what, we'd like some preventative measures to put in some control measures and minimize our risk. Next slide. And this is our friends over in Denver Water Authority. They show that they've been working with the Forest Service and putting some money and political leverage. On the left, you see before, on the right is after. They did some fuel reductions in this area and actually putting in some fire breaks and fuel reductions. The Denver Water has been putting in about $3 million a year into efforts and actually identifying areas critical in the watershed. When this area burned, it actually had, with a couple of fire breaks and these control measures, the state indicated that they thought that this probably saved $1 billion worth of infrastructure because that fire didn't burn across through. Next slide. Again, another before and after. Next slide. Another area of before and after. So there are things that can be done to successfully try and protect the watershed from burning. Been very well received. Forest Service. They're saying, okay, they've shared with us that these are the areas that we have. We've identified. Well, here's what's important to us. The closer it gets to us is the higher priority. The farther it is lower priority. So next slide. Anyway, so here's what we're doing as we're moving forward. Next slide. Statement about watershed and fires. Next slide. And who cares? Well, this is better words than I can give it. Next slide. Other risks. Of course, this is a little risk that we have in Provo Canyon, and a tanker truck that put about 1,000 gallons crude oil into the Provo River a couple of years ago. And there are lots of trucks. We've been working with UDOT to try and slow truck traffic down and some other measures. Next slide. And for us, we have communication in place, and this is something that happened. It was a success. We were notified, closed down our intakes. We were able to get this boom across just minutes before all that oil started coming down, because otherwise, and as a result, they're able to clean up all of this oil over the next week. And if we hadn't been successful at getting the notification and responding, that oil would have been in our pipelines and we'd have been done. And also, normally, we would shut down and this would go on down the river and be a cleanup effort from Homestead all the way to Utah Lake, but we were able to contain it. And so that was a win. Next slide. Some other threats. So up on the left-hand side, you see the intake for Toledo. And you might remember a couple of years ago, the whole city of Toledo couldn't drink their water. When you have 400,000 people without drinking water because of algotoxins, that catches national attention. Well, that's a deep lake. That's Lake Erie, and what caused that harmful algal bloom? They determined it was two things. It was nutrients and zebra mussel. Of course, the mussels, they have zebra, we have quagga, but they're both selected filter feeders, and because of the mussels consumed all of the green algae, they don't consume the blue green. What was left was the blue green. And so then all of a sudden they had all this huge bloom of blue-green algae, and it became, and whatever caused it to become toxic, it ended up going through their treatment plants, and the water was not safe to drink. Some people suggest that, oh, what we really need is these, we're spending about, well, I know our district puts about an extra $100,000 a year into Deer Creek and Jordanelle to shore up and extend the hours that boats are being washed, because the number one place that they come from, Lake Powell, which has quagga mussels, the number one place everyone comes is to Jordanelle after they leave that, and so we're trying to hopefully delay a quagga mussel infestation. The number two place they go after leaving Lake Powell is Utah Lake. And so some people say, well, yeah, well, wouldn't that be good? It would consume the algae. No, it'd be an ecological disaster. For us, it would plug up facilities and change the whole nature. But as you see in Toledo, the mussels consume the green, and now there's nothing to outcompete, which controls normally the Utah Lake. In fact, there's two things that are good controls there. One is that the wind blows and stirs up the water, and these are photosynthetic. Their photosynthesis they require for their food. They need sunlight, and so when the wind doesn't blow, and now they're able to compete. And if you don't have any green algae to outcompete the blue-green algae you get, and now you have a problem. And of course, you see some other real threats to water quality, and I'll just keep going. Next, and some others, there's a turkey spill, and there's phosphate plant out in Vernal that's a concern, and oil right above, or oil up on the left hand is right above starvation. Here's all these large oil containers, and keep going. And I'm about done. This shows that one thing this shows is the solution is working cooperatively. The answer for some people I've watched on the news say, well, the Forest Service isn't doing their job. What we need to do is clear cut the forest. That kind of shows what that's about. That's about how successful that would be. That's not the answer. And so we all have a lot of work to do, and what this group does, what other cooperative work groups do, actually make a difference and can be very successful at preserving and protecting water quality and actually enhancing water quality. And I think that's probably about it. Oh, and this was just, there's a lot of work to do. And some people say the best day at work is not, as the old saying, the worst day of fishing is always better than the best day at work, not necessarily, just for fun. I think work is good.
Oh my. That's a beast. Oh. Snapped. That's hurt bad. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the work you do to keep our water resources clean and safe for us. Mike, do you have anything on Secretary you want to pop in really quickly?
I have a presentation. In the interest of time, I don't know that I'll be able to get through it.
Would it be better to postpone it till our June meeting?
It actually might be.
Okay.
I could rush through it and do a quick 5-minute summary.
Anything quick we need to know besides, and we'll move that to the June meeting if that's okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. We'll go ahead and do that. And thank you so much for being prepared for that. Excellent. Okay. With that, we've got our technical committee. Do we have anything specific, Reed?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add. I think Eric's update, we at our last technical committee meeting that we held last week, we provided feedback to Eric on the vision document that he's creating. That's primarily the main thing worth reporting to the board, that we were involved in that and continue to help him with that. Besides that action item, it was primarily updating the commission with similar things that Eric has already updated the board on.
Okay, great. Make sure if you haven't had an opportunity yet to talk to your technical committee members, talk to them, get their feedback on it. I understand it was a great discussion, so we'll take care of that. Upcoming meetings are scheduled for June 20th, September 19th, and December 12th. And any other items there? Okay. Do we have any public comment at this time? Oh, did you have something?
Yeah, just for public comment.
Oh, for public comment. Okay, perfect. Go ahead. You want to start?
I'll do it really quick.
Yep.
But I think quite a few of you have been involved with the Valley Visioning Summit that Utah County is doing with the Vision Utah. And I've been to a few of their meetings, and it's put on by the chambers there, and they're trying to do visioning for Utah County. They talk about transportation, they talk about housing, they talk about land use, they talk about open space, they talk about roads across the Utah Lake. But we got this big piece right in the middle of Utah County. It's Utah Lake, and it's not mentioned ever in their visioning for Utah County. So I think we ought to be very proactive with this group and start getting the lake on their agenda, on their vision, and for Utah County.
That'd be great. Task skills with that. That'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Members of the public, anything? Please go ahead.
I had one question on the proposals.
Do you want to come up so we can get you on, so we can can you come introduce yourself and come to the microphone so we can hear you a little bit better for the record? Sorry, thanks.
My name is David Richards, Boreal Helix Consulting. I had one question on the proposals for algal control on Utah Lake. Are any of those proposals considering biomanipulation of the fisheries? If you control the fisheries, you will control the zooplankton, which controls the algae. So I'm not sure if any of those proposals have included that. You can talk to the fisheries biologists, and they might be able to help you out on that.
Yeah, what we received from the RFI, they had not. But we may receive a totally different group of proposals when we do the RFP.
Okay, excellent. Let us know somebody else had a comment, please.
Sure. I think you can hear me from here, can you? I can go over.
Yeah, just for the that'd be fine. Thanks.
It pains me with Bob's More's comments that you can't act on my requests, but you can put me in handcuffs and take me away. Yes. I'd like you to not lose sight of the fact of the streams running into and out of Utah Lake, and work toward improving the water trail access on all those streams. In the future, the valley will be filled up with houses, so we need to get those easements in place now to protect the water access, and also bike paths, multiple-purpose trails along the streams that flow in and out of Utah Lake. I'm a recreation organizer, a volunteer organizer, and I'm down here a lot, most recently on the Spanish Fork River. In the future, you could have a fantastic event coming down the Spanish Fork River in a kayak, camping on the lake, and then going up the Jordan River. No other community has that potential along the Wasatch Front that you have here. So, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment at this time. So we will be meeting again back at the Health and Justice Building. We appreciate Central Utah Water for hosting us today and letting us see their facility and also their presentations to us. And at this time, if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.